All right, welcome to the first session of our intermediate Canvas training series. So, this month before winter break, we're going to be doing 3 weeks of trainings that are going to go over some more intermediate topics within Canvas. So, not so much like how do I use the tool, but how can I best use the tool? So, that's kind of what we're going to be diving into. And today's first session is going to be all about accessibility. So, accessibility in your digital content, what to look for. How can I make sure that all of my content is accessible to all of my students? And then I'm going to show you some tools within Canvas that make that a lot easier. So, fortunately, Canvas does have some built in tools that help you to identify and fix potential accessibility issues. So, without further ado, today we do have a course. So, I'm going to share my screen. This is not a course that you have to enroll in. So, this course is actually an open course. So, hopefully, people who are watching the recording of this can see the link, but it's omaha.instructure.com/courses/97299. So, again, hopefully that's showing up in the recording. Maybe I'll throw a little screen in with that link blowing up. But for now, I'm just going to hit copy and paste this into the chat. So, like I said, this is not a course that you will enroll in. It's actually just an informational page, basically, that's built using a course. And this contains some links to resources that can assist you with the accessibility journey. So, the main thing that I'm going to be focusing on here today is my presentation slide deck, but we also have some examples that we'll be looking at down here. But if I pull into this slide deck, uh-oh, I might need to fix that link. I'll fix that after the training today. I forgot I broke some links on my page for when I show the link checker later. Here it is. Okay. So anyway, by the time you're watching this, that link's going to work. So the title for today's presentation is accessibility in digital content. And so we'll kind of go about like, why should I worry about accessibility? What do I look for? And then what tools can make this easier to fix? Help me identify some of these issues. So we'll just jump in for why accessibility. So all students, basically the main reason that I myself focus on accessibility when I'm creating digital content is that all students benefit from it. So if I make sure that when I'm pushing content out to my students that if they're using a screen reader or perhaps they use hearing aids or anything, as long if that course is accessible to everybody, that helps everybody. And so a good example I like to use is like closed captions. So despite my wife says that I am hard of hearing, but I'm not actually diagnosed hard of hearing, I like to watch everything with captions. So I like to watch things with captions. I don't know why. It just helps me get the information a little better. And so it helps me having those captions option when I'm watching videos, for example, even if I don't actually need them, to get the content. So that's an example of how all students benefit from making courses accessible. It just gives them options on how they can access their stuff. So continuing along, we're going to skip the laws section of it because it's not really important to our purposes. But some basic definitions. So we've got an accommodation. That's an auxiliary aid or service, like captions could be an accommodation, captions in a video. You could have transcripts. You could have, the ability to zoom in on things. Like there's a variety of different things that can count as an accommodation, but basically it's an aid or service that helps make your content accessible to students, even if they have some sort of learning disability or physical disability that might make it more difficult to access content in a digital space. thing is accessible. So accessible means a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. AKA, that's a mouthful, but AKA, it just means that everybody, regardless of whether or not they have a disability, is able to access all of your content as equally as possible. So, I'm sure most of us who are currently in the classroom or have been in the classroom have had students with special accommodation needs. So you're probably kind of familiar with those terms, but I had a variety of students over the years. I had students that I had to have a mic on a lanyard so that they could clearly hear my voice when I was teaching. I had students that had to use special typing machines because they had some mobility issues that made handwriting more difficult. This was, of course, before iPads and all that stuff. So, just making it accessible, making sure class is accessible. But in this presentation's case, how do I make my digital content accessible? So, scrolling on down the list, what we want to do is we want to kind of start off with talking about what do we actually look for in a course. So, or I keep saying course because that's where my mind goes by default because I'm working on Canvas courses all day. But anything, it could be a Word document, a PowerPoint, any kind of digital resource that you're using. What should we look for? What are some telltale things that we can look for to make it more accessible? And so if I hop back into my Canvas course, I actually have what I call my beginner level non-accessible Canvas page. So if I click on this link here, this brings me to a page that I created that has a lot of accessibility issues. So if somebody was coming into this with some sort of screen reader, for example, a lot of students have the page read back to them, which they can use Immersive Reader for that, which we'll go over here in a little bit. It can read the page back. This could be a real mess and make it very hard for it to understand. Additionally, there's some color issues. So like we can see that, this is very bright, kind of hard to see. So, and the longer version of this presentation, normally what I would do is I give this link to people and be like, hey, identify some of these accessibility issues and let's talk about it. But for the sake of time today, we're just going to kind of take a look at this. So if I look through it, I can see a variety of issues. Some of these images don't work. So was this image important? I have no idea because it's broken. If I come down here, same thing, another broken image. This chart is all messed up. There's color issues. So for example, this text is hard to read on the page because the color is so light. So, if you're a student that is maybe colorblind, for example, maybe you can't see that as well. So it's just one of those things that there's all sorts of issues, and there's even more that we'll be going over as we explore what to look for. So this is just an example of a really bad page. Most people's pages aren't this bad. For years, I did course reviews at Creighton University when I worked with their ed department because they had a legal requirement to make sure everything was accessible for these courses that students were paying for like the medical school, the ed program, all that stuff. And one of my jobs, one of them was to assist teachers or professors who had built their courses with making their courses accessible. So what I did is I thought of all like the little things that I found over the years and I just threw it up onto this page. So most resources aren't this bad, but this has a lot of examples on one page of things. Another thing here to mention is like this click here now. Where does this link go? I have no idea. I click on it and it brings me to a course setup checklist. That's nice. But that's like an example of one of the accessibility things. So let's go over what to look for. And again, if you have the link to this page, just hang on to it, maybe bookmark it. You can come back to all these resources later because I do leave this page open. So let's look at what we got here. So the first thing that we talk about is audio video, providing captions or transcripts, kind of self-explanatory. If somebody has a hard time, if somebody has some sort of hearing impairment or something like that, just having captions is a great resource to have. Unfortunately, we're in a world where people are using AI to make really good automatic captions. I've been working in instructional design for long enough that even 10 years ago, we had to hire a private company that we'd send our videos to, and they would go through and they would manually type out the captions for us and then send it back. You don't have to do that anymore. A lot of times it's instant. Right now, I have captions going instantly on my Teams meeting. So if you have that feature turned on, you'll be seeing auto captions. And they might not be 100% perfect all the time, but it's a heck of a lot better than nothing. That's what I like to tell people. You can also do transcripts. So having a page printed out that contains the text for one of your videos. But I always put captions are the better option because then they can actually watch the video along with it. So they don't have to have a paper in front of them where they're trying to compare audio. This comment here, YouTube auto captions are not good enough. I put that for when I would give this presentation at the college level, because sometimes I do this at conferences. If you have a legal requirement to provide captions, YouTube auto captions don't generally meet those requirements because it has to be like 95% accurate. But in our use case as K-12 educators, it doesn't really matter as much. So, and quite frankly, since I've made this, I'd have to go see if that's even still true. So I should probably research that fact. But they've come a long way, especially with AI coming out. The captions are pretty good. And like I said, they're good enough. So the next thing to check for is like font styles. So using easy to read fonts with a good font size, not making your text too small or even too large. And then using good fonts like Calibri, Arial. So this PowerPoint is all in Arial, for example. And then some examples of bad ones. I always get comments on this, but Comic Sans, this one and like this one. If you use some of these fonts like this, it can be good like in small doses for like decorative purposes, but if you have like a wall of text or like a paragraph in one of these fonts, it can be harder to read, and more importantly, it makes it harder for screen reading technology to pick up what it's saying. So that's why I suggest that. So usually sticking to like some of the basics, Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, these are all pretty easy to read by most software. So that's why I like that. The next thing is like font color, good color contrast. So not putting like super light text on a light background, for example, or dark text on a dark background. Just making sure that the text stands out. And then the second note here is color should not convey meaning. So like, for example, if you want a phrase to stand out, just making it red so it stands out probably isn't super accessible, because if you have a student that's colorblind or something like that, they might miss out on the fact that that text is supposed to stand out. So what I always tell people is color, you can use color for decorative purposes, of course, but if you're trying to convey meaning with it, like make something stand out, you shouldn't just use color. So my trick around this, because I do like adding different colors to things to make them stand out, is I also will bold the text. So for example, if I wanted this to stand out, I would change the color. I would also bold it. And then that way, even if they can't make out the color, it still is bolded and stands out more. So that's a way around that guideline. So something to consider. So if you do use color like I do to make text stand out, just don't use it alone. You can use bolding, italics, something else to make it stand out aside from color. In addition to color, I should say. Section headings. So in a lot of tools, you'll notice that there's section headings built in. If I go back to a Canvas page, oops, I hate this Teams bar. It's always in the way. If I go to edit, I'll notice that there's built-in text sizes here. So like paragraph, there's heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. One of the guidelines is to go in order with these headings. So the very top, you'd use heading 2, and then like however you want to break things up in your text, you should go in the heading order. So if I have another main component, I can use heading 2 again, but if I have a subcomponent, I can use heading 3. And then if there's a subcomponent below that, use heading 4 and so on. So just going in order with these top headings. The reason for that is if a page is being read back to a student, this helps the screen reader identify those breaks in text a little better. So that's why these are built in here. And they're in other forms of software as well. So basically just trying to go in order with those. Alt text images. So when you add an image to Canvas, it'll pop up a little box like this asking for alt text. And basically what that is it's just a description for a picture. So like if a student can't see it, if it's being read to them, it'll tell them what's in the picture. But you'll notice that there is also a box here that says decorative image. And that's because if it's something that's just purely decorative, it doesn't add to the content of a page. You can click that box and you don't have to put in an alt text. So if it's purely decorative, it's only if it adds to the content should we really focus on using alt text. But some people, just to be safe, will put alt text on everything to describe an image. Link text. So we kind of talked about this one before, having vague or repetitive link text such as click here. It uses language that makes sense out of context. So as an example, the CNN homepage features numerous online articles. If I click on this link, I know exactly where it's going to bring me. So that's a good practice, is to label links in that way instead of just putting like click here. And then a other example is like when people just copy and paste big long links. So do I have one in here? I do not. But like, let's say I wanted to share this link. I actually did this at the beginning of the presentation. I just copy and paste from the bar. If I copy and paste this and put it on a page, that screen reader is going to read every single individual letter back to that student. And so that can get really long and repetitive. Fortunately, when you insert a link into Canvas, it does give you the option to change the title of it to like, this is the page it's going to lead you to, which is like what this is. It says, click here to see the best website ever. And with that, questions. I've been watching the chat. I didn't see anything pop up in there, but does anybody have any questions for now about some of the features about some of the things we talked about? Okay. Hopping on down the list, there's only a few more here that we'll cover. So the next one is going to be like tables. Use headings and sections, basically, is what that means. So, and most of us do that automatically anyway. But yeah, having like a title over your table or something like that, it's a good practice. And then this one here is a kind of an important one. It's all document types should be accessible. So if you add a document to a course or whatever, is it accessible? Can it be read? Now, iPads have come a long way with this because now there's a feature where you can highlight text even in just like a picture, which is really awesome. But one good way to check and see if a document can be read by a screen reader when you're using it, for example, is by clicking on the text. So right now, this is a PowerPoint. I can click and I can highlight the text in this PowerPoint. What that means is if somebody was using a screen reader, it would be able to read that text back to me because it's not just an image. Whereas with this right here, this page, if I go and I try to click on this, you'll notice that as I'm clicking on it, I can't actually highlight anything. And that's because it's just a scan of a book. So if I'm clicking on it and I can't highlight it, that means that if a student is using some sort of assistive reader to access your material, they're not actually going to be able to read what's on that page because I cannot highlight the text. So, and I always tell people sometimes if you save it as like a PDF or something, it will it'll make it so that you can highlight the text again. So you'll just have to play around with it if you do have documents like this. But like I said, also test it with an iPad because recently with some more recent software updates, they have added features in that allow students to highlight text even on things like this. So, but that's the trick on how you can tell. You can click. If I can't highlight it, that means it's not readable to a screen reader. And with that, now that we kind of know what to identify, we're going to talk about some of the Canvas tools that help you identify these issues and help you fix them. So to start off with, probably the main thing, if I go back and I go into my example of a non-accessible page and I click edit. So let's say I'm working on a page in Canvas. One thing that you might notice is there's a little jumping jacks guy down here with a number 13 next to it. What this is called is the Canvas Accessibility Checker. And so what you can do is you can click on it, and what it'll do is it'll tell you issues with the page. It won't catch them all, but it makes it a lot easier. So like this one, it's highlighting this text here and telling me that that is too bright. So what I can do is I can come up here onto my accessibility checker and I can click around to make the color a little darker. And then once it's good to go, it'll say apply. So if I pick a color that's too bright still, it won't let me hit apply. But if I click one that's a little darker, I can hit apply and it fixes that text for me. Another thing is down here, it's telling me that this stuff is not in a proper list. So what I can do is I can hit the button that says format as a list. And that just corrected my item into a list format. So I can hit apply, and then it's going to do each one of these individually. So I can do format as a list. Oh, we had another color issue. So I'll just make that a little darker, hit apply. Same thing with this. I got to click around to find the right color. Shoot. Here we go. Hit apply. Same thing. This one's telling me that this image is broke. There's not an easy way to fix that, unfortunately, but I can go in and re-add the image. And then if I want to skip one for now, I can just hit next. This one's saying that there's no caption for that table, so on and so forth. So you can click through the information it's asking you to add and hit apply, and it fixes it right on the page. It makes it very quick and easy. So as you're building stuff in Canvas, maybe just like pay attention to this little guy down here with the blue area, and that will actually tell you if it's auto detecting any kind of accessibility issues in there. And this doesn't catch everything, like I said, but in my experience, it only gets better over time, and it catches a lot of stuff, a lot of the really basic stuff. So it's a good practice. You know, what I like to do is when I push a Canvas course out to somebody, I will just, as I'm building each page, just watch that little thing there at the bottom, and if something pops up, I'll just correct it. So just kind of a neat little feature. I really like that. So if I hit save, that saves all my changes, of course. And so we can see this looks a little better at least. So at least I don't have any like ridiculous colors or anything. And, you know, this stuff is all formatted into a list properly. If I go to settings, there's another button which I'm going to demo for you. So in settings, there is something called the validate links and content button. So if you go to settings and look at the very bottom option over here, I can click this. And what it will do if I hit start link validation is it will actually scan my entire course looking for links that don't work. I broke my link on my OneDrive document, hoping that it would catch it. We'll see if it does. And as we're waiting for that, as a side note, like I said, I am going to keep this Canvas course open. But you'll have access to this PowerPoint, which does go over these tools later on down, and then some of these examples of pages that you can practice with as well. So let me go see if it finished. Sometimes it's real quick. Oh, here it goes. So what it did is it told me about these broken links. So it found 5 broken links. It didn't find my broken file. Oh wait, maybe it did here. I'm not sure. But what I can then do is I can click, it gives me the page, and it says click here to view this course checklist. I can click here, and it brings me directly to the page, and I can then correct any links. So it's just a really handy tool when you're done building a course or building content. If you just want to quick scan your links, that's a good practice to get into. And like I said, you can't auto fix them because it doesn't know where it's really supposed to go, but it at least points them out to you. And then finally, the last tool I want to talk about that's built into Canvas, and this is probably more so for your students, but it's good for you to be aware of it as well, so you can guide them here if they need it. But at the top of each page, there's something called an immersive reader. So if I click immersive reader up here, and this is on the iPad version as well, what it does is it brings up this readable view. And if I hit the play button,
Session description. Welcome signage on Focus Photography.
and it's reading my caption
With
for the
many
image,
schools and universities adopting more technology.
and it will read the page to them. But it gets even better. If students come up here into the settings, they can adjust certain settings to help them with it. So if I click here for text preferences, they can change the size of it. They can increase the spacing. They can change the font. They can change the color, all sorts of stuff to customize this view for them for while they're having the page read to them. Additionally, there's the grammar options area. So if your students want to practice grammar, they can, select to highlight nouns in a certain color. So that's really neat. And then if I do the reading preferences option over here on the right, this is probably one of the coolest parts. You can actually come down here to the translate area and select from these languages, and it will translate the page for you. So if I scroll through and look at some of the languages, I had a lot of Karen students when I was in the classroom. Unfortunately, I don't think that they have that language on here. But there's a bunch of others, like Spanish, I'm assuming is going to be a pretty popular one. And they even have different, forgive me if I get this term incorrect, but different dialects of Spanish. So they have Spanish from Mexico, Spanish from actual Spain, Latin American version of Spanish. So let's say I'm a student from Mexico and I want to test this. So I'm going to go and click Spanish Mexico. Okay. And then it says either by word or by document. I can click on the document button, and that translates the whole page into Spanish. So, and then if they want to, along the top here, they can click back from original Spanish so they can compare it. So if you're a Spanish teacher, this could be a cool feature because you could have your students compare back and forth. If you have a student that their primary language is Spanish and maybe they're still in the midst of learning English, this could help ease that transition for them because it'll do the page. I had a teacher one time in a live training that I did for this that spoke fluent Spanish, and they told me that this translation was pretty good. So they said it was a pretty good translation. I do not speak fluent Spanish, unfortunately, but they told me it was pretty good for the tool since it was automatic. And that was a year ago. It's gotten even better since then. So yeah, you can have your students play around with that. And this is for their view. So they would do this on their iPads when they're accessing your course. But that just really helps with accessibility as well. So with that, I'm going to ask, are there any final questions about any of this before we wrap up? Awesome. So it doesn't look like there's any final questions. So what I'm going to do now is stop the recording. And of course, my name is Tyler Shaban. You'll find my information on the Canvas page that you're enrolled into for these trainings. And you can reach out to me there if you have questions after watching the recording. Thank you and have a great day.